Hey everybody, it's Lavender Town, and today I was having trouble deciding what to draw, so I thought I might as well let my tarot cards decide what I'm going to draw today. I'm going to be using 3 different decks of tarot cards. I'm kind of a collector, so I have quite a few, and make 3 separate illustrations based on the readings I pull from each. Basically, I'm going to pull 3 cards and use them each as a separate part of the drawing. So I decided that the first card is going to describe the sort of mood and theme of the drawing. The second card would describe the character, and the third card would describe the environment. This deck is very classic and simple, and so I'm going to try to keep that style involved in the illustration as well. I got really lucky with this first pull. 2 of them really seemed to go together, and right away I started having ideas. But first, to check the official meanings. According to the cards, our theme should be charming and pretty. The character should be an adventurer of some kind, and the environment should be something related to the sea or a ship. Okay cards, I'll try it out. The cards inspired me to do an oceanic romance, and because long distance was another keyword of the ship card, I thought I would do a romance between 2 people who would be separated most of the time. So this led me to a seaside captain with a mermaid girlfriend, and I just wanted it to be really classic and pretty and cute. It's clear on the cards that the illustrations, at least originally, were not digitally created, and so I spent a lot of time messing around with my pens trying to find one that had just the right amount of grit to look more realistically like real ink. I think I ended up sticking with my regular inking thick and thin brush, which has a tiny bit of grit, but mainly is just very good for control and line weight, because I realized a majority of the texture on the cards actually came from the paper and not the pen, so I'm going to overlay a pattern over it after I'm done drawing it instead. In order to reinforce the long distance element of the ship card, I decided to put physical obstacles between them that specifically relate to the world that they're from. So the mermaid is climbing up on a rock from the ocean, and the captain is hanging over the side of her ship, but they can't get any closer than this. They are sort of held apart by their circumstances, because that was kind of the story that I felt the cards were telling me. I also tried to make sure that the environment was very clearly of the ocean and not a lake or something like that, and so I made sure that the ship was very clearly a large vessel, though I ended up cutting off a majority of it because I decided I wanted all of the illustrations to be a square shape. It also allows them to be more of a focus because the ship was taking up way too much space on the previous sketch. For the colors, I'm going against my usual instincts and sticking with a mostly neutral, beigey kind of palette so that it matches the cards a little better. I noticed that the only colors that were really popping were sort of aquas and browns, so I'll be sticking with those for this illustration. I spent a lot of time trying to make sure that the cast over all the colors was right and that the paper texture looked right, because that is a huge aspect of what makes these cards look so old and interesting. I made the mermaid's colors mostly cold and blue oriented, whereas the captain's colors are all based in warm browns and reds, just to separate them, and then I did a warm rosy cast over the whole thing like a sunset to sort of unify them again. So now that the illustration for the Leonard Mend deck is finished, I'm going to move on to the fairy tale deck. This one is a modern deck, and it has really interesting cartoon illustrations as well as each card relating to a fairy tale. So this time the theme card will be based on the story of the Light Princess. The character will be based on Snow White and Rose Red, and the environment will be based on the tale of the Goose Girl. An interesting set, to say the least. So according to the cards, the theme will be reality and emotional connection. The characters will be sisters who represent darkness and light, and the environment will relate to identity theft and intimidation. The first idea I had was about the environment, identity theft and intimidation. It immediately made me think of a masquerade ball, so that's where I started. For the characters, I drew twins, one dark and one light, and because the theme is about reality and the environment is a masquerade ball, I thought that the reality of their characters would be swapped with their masks. So the dark sister is wearing the mask of the sheep and the light sister is wearing the mask of the wolf. Because the deck itself has a creepy childlike fairy tale vibe, I wanted to try to incorporate that in this illustration, and I feel like a masquerade with 2 little ballerina twins right in the center is a good way to do that. I wanted the whole thing to be moody, and I wanted to make it feel like there's a story going on underneath. I'm trying to make sure that everything looks really symmetrical with the twins. I feel like it'll give it a creepier vibe, and I want them to look very, very similar other than the masks and the little wings behind them. Even though they're literally duplicates of each other at this point, I'm using little changes in the body language to show the viewer which sister is the more vulnerable one who looks to the other for help and advice, and which one is the one that will take direct action. I'm doing this by making sure that the sister with the sheep mask on has her hand on top of the other sister's hand, and the other sister is looking at her, trying to get a read on what they should do next, whereas the sister wearing the sheep mask is staring directly at the viewer. When you only have one image to work with and not a comic or something like that, it's really important that you make sure there's little hints to who the characters are. Otherwise, your viewer might not be able to see as much what you wanted to portray. After the characters are mostly inked, I'm putting in a little candelabra in the background so that it doesn't feel so empty. If I had more time, I think I'd spend a couple hours just adding things to the background and maybe some more party members, but for this simple illustration, I think this will do just fine. For colors, I'm sticking with a lot of purpley blues and plums and a little bit of pink, and I'm trying to make sure that the light is dramatic because I want this to look like a story piece, and I want the whole thing to have an unsettling feeling. I'm putting a shadow over both the adults in the forefront so that the girls still stick out even though they are smaller in the image than these characters that are in the front. That's really important, otherwise they'll get completely overshadowed. I'm also making sure that they have more differences in color versus the other characters so that they definitely stand out as the main part of the drawing. Adding more contrast to your character guarantees that they're going to stick out more than whatever else is going on. It's also a good way to make sure they stand out from a busy background, though obviously that's not going to be an issue with this image because the background is just a flat wall. I spent quite a while fiddling with the light, shadow, and the drop shadows on the girls because I feel like it was really important to make sure that that lighting was right, so otherwise it wouldn't have the right feeling. I don't want it to feel like they're just awkwardly standing there. I want there to be a lot of mood and atmosphere in this image, and usually lighting's the way to go when you're trying to achieve that. At the last minute, I decided to put these creepy highlights in the eyes of the foreground adults so that the viewer feels like they're being stared at. And with that, it's all finished. I also put a paper texture over this one because I felt like I wanted it to have a bit more of a grit on the surface. Last but not least is the tiny tarot, and I thought for this one I might as well do a drawing tiny challenge because, well, it's tiny tarot, it makes sense. So first I had to try to shuffle these, which was an absolute nightmare. They're so small, they're really hard to handle, and they keep flipping around on me. But after I got them straightened out, I just wanted to pull 3 like usual and then try to make an illustration that is around the same size as the height of one of these cards, which is about 0.8 inches, so it's less than an inch. So for our theme card, I pulled, well, it's upside down, but it's the High Priestess. For our character card, I pulled the Hanged Man, which is also upside down. Wait a minute, am I holding this upside down? Yeah, I am. For the environment card, I pulled the Magician. So the cards do have different meanings when they're upside down, but I think if they're all upside down, it probably just means I was holding the deck upside down. So I'm going to flip them all around and use the standard right side up meanings of each. So according to the cards, this illustration will have the theme of mystery and things not being what they appear, a character that is a traitor, and some type of magical environment, perhaps involving an altar. So the first challenge of the piece was how to show you guys that I was actually doing a tiny art challenge when I'm doing it digitally, because obviously you can't actually see whether or not I've zoomed it in. So I decided to show you guys what I was seeing while I zoomed it up for you guys in my recording software. So at least you can see that I really did draw it very small, if the fact that my inking is a complete disaster doesn't tip you off. So for the theme of the actual illustration, I was trying to do a traitor within a coven of witches because I thought that would fit with the magical environment and the traitor. Things not being what they appear perfectly matches in with both magic and a traitor, so that one felt like an easy one. Weirdly enough, the hardest part about drawing this small was just reminding myself that this was supposed to be a final image and not a thumbnail, because this is usually how I draw my thumbnails. And with that, I'm done. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's kind of a weird one, but if you have a deck of tarot cards, I highly recommend trying this if you're ever art blocked. They have lots of interesting imagery and stuff in them, so it can be really helpful if you're not really feeling the creative juices but you want to draw. Thanks for staying till the end, and I'll see you next video. Thank you so much to my patrons, including Bambo, Cal Pompon, Cat Pupchino, Dr. Casket, Dustin Williams, Elizabeth Alvin, Hanuki, Hope Chilsum, JJ Jade, Blep, Blah 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 Blah, Matthew Kunke, Micah Dactyl, Okamore, Ollie, Rachel Singh, Rosie Warlock, Sergeant Pendulum, The Artsy Moose, Your Boy ST, Zixfith, and Zoe Stardust.